Modern geology has dated some rocks found on the Earth to be about 4 billion years old, and many scientists agree that the Earth is most likely 4 to 4.5 billion years old. The only problem with this is that there is no place in the Earth's ocean that can be dated more than 200 million years. In 1912, Alfred Wegener, a famous German Arctic explorer and meteorologist, released his theory of continental drift. He had good reason for developing this theory because the fossil record showed many plants and land animals lived on all the continents, including Antarctica. South America and Africa seemed to look as though they fit together, and had once broken apart in the past and created the Atlantic Ocean, which now separates them. But it wasn't until the 1950s that continental drift became an accepted scientific theory. The current theory is that all the continents were once joined together on the Atlantic side, a huge supercontinent called Pangaea, one huge island on the Earth, while the other 3/4 of the Earth was covered with deep oceans. The problem is that 30 years later, the U.S. Natural Geophysical Data Center released a map of the ages of the complete seafloor, which proves the modern theory of Pangaea is wrong. The continents not only fit together if you remove the Atlantic Ocean, they also fit together if you remove the Pacific Ocean. If you remove all the oceans on the Earth, the upper tectonic plates fit together like a broken vase. The Earth has been getting larger in diameter, and has been since the ocean started spreading about 200 million years ago. This is what is referred to as the growing Earth theory. Seafloor spreading is a provable fact and is not in debate in any way. The problem with plate tectonics is that there is no proof to substantiate the theory of subduction. Current theory says that the ocean floor recycles itself, that although the ocean is spreading, it is also sliding under the continents into the mantle. This theory is from the early 1900s, and modern data has disproved it, yet geologists hold on to it. Scientists are no different than most people. Once they believe a certain thing, they tend to hold on to it for all it's worth, even if there is overwhelming evidence to the contrary. This mostly happens in the public sector of science, where politics prevails and public money is their only funding source. If the ocean floor is recycling itself, as they say, why aren't there massive volcanoes and rings of fire around all the edges of all the continents? Because subduction doesn't happen, and the ocean floor cannot dive into a molten rock that is twice as dense as the ocean floor. The rifts in the oceans are where the continents first separated, which runs the circle of the globe in almost every continent. There are over 80,000 miles of deep undersea thermal vents that not only spew out all different sorts of gas continuously, they are the point at where the ocean spreads apart. Here's a map of the Ring of Fire, and it only exists in the Pacific Ocean. This is modern scientists' justification for the subduction theory. If you look at this map of the ages of the seafloor, it clearly shows that the youngest ocean floor is along the rifts, which is the black line mirrored on each side by the red. The oldest seafloor, except for along the west coast of the United States, is the ocean floor next to the continents. You can see this from the map that the ocean floor ages are symmetrical from the rifts, growing older as it reaches the shores of the continents. If you look at the Pacific Rift, it runs right along the western coast of the United States. This is why there are so many earthquakes on the west coast. The land is very close to the spreading ocean, and huge compressional pressures built up on land. This is the Ring of Fire that is supposed to be the smoking gun of subduction. But the Ring of Fire is less than 40% of the length of the spreading rifts. Why is there no Ring of Fire in the Atlantic, Indian, or Arctic Ocean then? It's because compared to all other oceans and seas, the Pacific is spreading much wider and faster than any other ocean, and the Eastern Asian continental plates were literally crushed to pieces. How can modern subduction theory explain the African Rift Valley? The Horn of Africa is slowly breaking apart from the main continent. One day there will be an ocean separating these two land masses. Notice the gases that are escaping from the rift, just like the deep ocean vents. If subduction were true, why aren't there mountains of loosely packed ocean sediment along every shoreline in the world? An oceanic plate can slide under a continental plate so smooth to not even leave any of its upper sediment behind, yet cause all these massive earthquakes? Deep ocean trenches are modern geology's answer, but studies have shown there is not enough sediment in the trenches to justify subduction. The Atlantic Ocean is spreading on both sides, yet there are no volcanoes on the east coast of the Americas like there are in the Ring of Fire. At least not like you see on the west coast of the United States, or the western coast of Europe and Africa to account for any subduction, which by its theory, there should be tons of active volcanoes all along the continental coast to make up for the seafloor spreading, which there aren't. If recycling of the seafloor were true, why wouldn't there be a ring of fire between all continents all over the world? The problem with the Pangea theory is shown in how South America and Africa fit together on a modern-day Earth, because they don't fit together at all. If you join the two continents at the northern edge, there is an angled gap at their southern ends. This is no different than a button-down shirt on somebody who is too large for it. The bottom will angle out because the person is too large for the shirt to fit properly. But on a smaller globe, South America and Africa fit together perfectly, both north and south. A well-respected geologist from the University of Tasmania named Samuel Carey published a book called The Expanding Earth in 1976 that pointed out that the continental drift theory is wrong and that the Earth is growing. He said the continents are fixed on Earth and that all the growth is happening in the oceans. He also said that not only do all continents fit together perfectly in the Atlantic, they also fit together at the same time in the Pacific, but on a much smaller planet. The scientific community ignored him, just like they ignored Wegener initially on his continental drift theory. They asked Carey to explain the mechanism that caused the Earth to grow, which he could not. The scientific community was being highly superficial since no one had properly explained the mechanism for subduction or continental drift. Simply saying that upper tectonic plates drifted on convectional currents of the mantle does not prove a theory. But many scientists today are taking a closer look at the growing Earth theory. The growing Earth theory takes plate tectonics to its next logical conclusion. Plate tectonics was only giving half the picture of what was really happening. If the Pacific and the Atlantic Ocean spread, yet the continents fit together like a broken sphere, with all the oceans removed, one would logically deduce that the Earth must be larger today than it was in the past. The question is, since all planets in our solar system are different sizes, isn't it reasonable to believe just because humans are now observing them in our extremely short-lived existence with geological time, that the planet's process of forming may not be over? Logically, why would anyone believe that the Earth or any celestial body will never get any bigger or smaller? In the last 200 million years, the Earth's diameter has doubled due to oceanic growth, quadrupling its size and gravity. There is much more compelling evidence to support a growing Earth than there is for the plate tectonic theory. Many scientists once agreed that the Earth was the center of the universe, and that the Earth was flat. Even when Galileo proved not everything revolved around the Earth, showing the phases of Venus, it was ignored. Even today, scientific dogma is held in high esteem, while scientific proof is ignored. America's Midwest was once a giant ancient sea. We know this because of the huge limestone deposits left by sedimentation. Notice the approximate area of these limestone deposits. It lies in the area between the high plains in the west and the Appalachian Mountains in the east. This is the same drainage pattern that exists today. Generally, precipitation flows toward the center of the continent through the Mississippi Valley River basin. Water generally flows from the high plains to the east and from the Appalachians to the west. The ancient sea in the Midwest could only have been there if there was no ocean for the Mississippi River basin to drain to. All of the really old fish fossils and marine fossils are found on land. You will not find many fossils in the ocean because they are relatively new compared to the age of the Earth. As the continents began to break apart and create lower seafloor plates, the water from the seas on the land began to flow into the newly formed rifts. These rifts spew out all sorts of gases: methane, sodium, chlorine, oxygen, hydrogen, and all the noble gases. This explains why all oceans are all salt water, from the mixing of sodium and chlorine gases within the water. Yet almost every body of water on land is fresh water. Current plant life easily shows that the continents were all once together on a smaller planet. Since North America was separated by a large sea, plant life is very different on the east coast and west coasts. Tree life in New England is the same as trees in Europe, while plant life in Florida is similar to the rainforest in South America and Africa. Without any oceans, the rainforest plant type would have extended around the globe to Indonesia and on to the southern California area. Trees in the northern part of North America are the same tree life found in the Soviet Union. An Earth with no oceans would be about a quarter of the size it is today. That means that gravity during the reign of the dinosaurs was also about a quarter or less of what it is today, about 200 million years ago. This reduction in gravity is shown by the huge sizes of animals and plants back then. Dragonflies had 2-foot wingspans. Scorpions and centipedes were a massive size compared to today. In less gravity, life forms can take on larger size because the forces are much weaker on the body, and size is an advantage to both predator and prey. Even if oxygen levels were much higher back then, which is often an excuse as to why animals were so large, it doesn't explain the large plant life. From fossils, paleontologists can prove that the bone densities of the dinosaurs were no more dense than that of humans. Yet many dinosaurs were so big that if today's gravity were the same back then, they wouldn't be able to walk, let alone hunt, without breaking bones. The bones of larger dinosaurs would not be able to take the kinds of force necessary to run, hunt, or fight, and they would simply snap. Scientists have found brontosaurus footprints on dry land, proving that the large creatures did not reside in water. One of the largest dinosaurs, Argentinosaurus, was 120 feet long and weighed over 100 tons. At that size and that weight, it would be like a blue whale living on land. You can't grow that large on land in today's gravity and expect to function in any way. A blue whale uses its buoyancy in the water to offset its massive weight due to gravity. A blue whale cannot live on land. Its massive size would crush its own bones, and it would die very quickly. There is just no way these creatures could have ever walked on land in today's gravity, yet there is fossil proof that they were land animals. The largest known predator is Spinosaurus, bigger than a T-Rex, weighing up to 8 tons. If you look at the legs of these predators, one can easily see these dinosaurs were extremely fast and powerful, and they used their speed to hunt down prey. In contrast, an elephant leg is more built for support, but not for any great speed. Elephants can't really run, they can only walk fast, and they can't jump. Today's gravity is too strong to allow something that big to be fast and agile, a must if they were to survive. Stromatolites, a type of coral, builds a new layer on itself every day. So in 1 year you can count 365 layers of the coral. Yet in the geological past, this same coral would produce 450 to 800 layers a year, indicating much shorter days in a year. The Earth may have been spinning faster when it was smaller, the same way an ice skater's spinning increases when they bring in their arms and spin. Even ancient petrified sand dunes found in sandstone suggest lower surface gravity at the time they were preserved. Every soil has what is called an internal angle of friction. You can see this at the quarry when sand is dumped into a huge pile, and its slopes form a certain maximum angle. As more sand is piled on top of it, the sand gets too steep and will eventually resettle to a shallower, more stable angle. Ancient sand dunes have been shown to have higher slopes, indicating larger internal angles of friction, which suggests that they were made in an environment that had much less gravity than today. Mountain building and earthquakes are also explained much easier on an Earth that is growing. Since the continents are stationary, fixed to the Earth, they do not drift, and there are two major forces that build mountains. The first is compressional forces exerted on the land by spreading seas. Imagine a piece of tinfoil as a continent. Place your hand on either side of the foil and swing your hands together until your thumbs meet. This crumpling of the continent is one way mountains are made. India didn't crash into Asia. It did, however, break from Africa while it was still attached to Asia. The ocean spreading simply has folded the continent. The other way is very simple. The continents have to recurve from time to time because as the Earth grows, the continent's curvature is greater than the curvature that is what is beneath the continent. So the continent forms a massive stone bridge that has to collapse every so often. Imagine the flattening out of a grapefruit on a basketball. The skin of the fruit would have to break to recurve to the basketball. This is why earthquakes can happen anywhere, and one time the Mississippi ran backwards after an earthquake. Samuel Carey analyzed various data and found that the Earth was growing at a rate of about 6 inches in circumference per year, and accelerating exponentially. Although the exact amount of growth is still in debate, even satellite data have to be adjusted for inconsistencies that they have come across since GPS satellites have been introduced. The growth of the Earth doesn't come from dust and meteors from space. It comes from deep thermal vents, or rifts, where the oceans are spreading. Here, hot gases continue to blow out from them constantly, along with upheaval of magma, creating new matter and spreading the ocean floor. Yet because the Earth is not massive enough and doesn't have large enough gravitational forces, gases blow off into space from the upper atmosphere all the time. There are 80,000 miles of mid-oceanic rifts ejecting gases and lava all the time. There are countless volcanoes that erupt frequently, bringing mass to the surface. But where on the Earth do you find the opposite happening? Where do you find an influx of matter traveling into the Earth to make up for all the matter that is being released? There are so few sinkholes that it can't really be a possibility. There is evidence that celestial bodies make their own matter, at least anything with a magnetic field. But how can that happen? In 1932, Carl Anderson discovered a particle called a positron and won the Nobel Prize. A positron is just like an electron, the same weight and size, but it has a positive charge. Later on, scientists discovered that the positron is made from a photon striking something our technology can't identify yet. When it strikes it, the photon makes both a positron and an electron. The positron immediately seeks out a new electron, and they both disappear again. So science called that antimatter. Science used to believe in something called ether, an ocean of subatomic particles in the universe. Even Einstein believed in it. There has been some experiments with lasers to claim that ether doesn't exist, but the experiments were under the assumption that light is affected by ether. The Earth has a magnetic field of both positive and negative lines. So when a positron is created along a negative field line of the Earth, it would be protected from any negatively charged electrons, since like charges repel each other. An atom is mostly empty space, just like the solar system. Positrons trapped on the negative magnetic lines of the Earth could easily travel to the Earth's center and be made by a natural process into an atom's nucleus. Now, a proton and a neutron, the larger particles that make up an atom's nucleus, have atomic weights that are exact multiples of positrons and electrons. If you can imagine a simple process of positrons massing together to form larger particles, an introduction of an electron would create a hydrogen atom. And the heat and pressure inside the Earth can build all other atoms from a hydrogen atom. These atoms are then forced up through the Earth through the oceanic rifts. You see this happen throughout our solar system. The northern lights are radioactive subatomic particles trapped in the magnetic field of the Earth. But this is not unique to Earth. Jupiter, Saturn, all have northern and southern lights. Any celestial body close enough to the Sun that has a magnetic field will have northern and southern lights. There are many things that we have discovered over the years that show us just how fact can be stranger than fiction. New scientific discoveries happen all the time that force us to rewrite our textbooks and change the way we view things in the future. New discoveries that change scientific theory forever and change the way we look at our universe.
We come to the Earth, which, well, grew to get here, the way it is now. Here is our world, our planet Earth, floating in space. We will be going backward in time, imperfectly, but done in a very disciplined manner. Please notice there is no subduction, no rotation of tectonic plates, no twisting, no form-fitting, no altering shapes or sizes. It would be impossible for these continental plates to fit together perfectly without this being true, and yet the upper tectonic plates fit together perfectly on a much smaller planet. Yes, there's been some erosion, landslides, blah blah, but overall this activity is insignificant. There is a kind of conspiracy of silence among certain scientists. They know, but are not telling you, that the upper tectonic plates of Earth also join in the Pacific. Not partially, they join totally. You are asked to believe that the continents swim or drift about willy-nilly, bumping and crashing as if they were on a greased skillet. This is not true. The simple truth is apparently too upsetting to too many apple carts. We're now going forward in time to show how the actual growth of the Earth took place. Imperfect as to details, but the overall is nailed. Antarctica, as you see, has become subtropical. Africa, on a smaller globe, moved way downward under the globe. In fact, for hundreds of millions of years, the bottom of Africa was the South Pole. South America's tail goes under and wraps around the bottom of Africa. Then incredibly, it joins coast with Antarctica. 65 million years ago and more, these continents were joined, and marsupials like the duck-billed platypus roamed from Australia, Antarctica, and across southern South America and up into Africa. The platypus. Dinosaurs roamed all over this world on the upper tectonic plate because there were no oceans, just shallow seas. Here today, Antarctica is frozen over, and Australia and its surrounding islands are the remaining home of marsupials. Do you see how broadly the Pacific is opening compared to the Atlantic? This is exactly why the knee-jerk Pangea theory exists. The Pacific spread is too difficult to easily visualize because it's so big. The Atlantic spread is so obvious that a child would recognize it, but they are the same.